My name is David Heine. I'm a Korean veteran. I live in Las Vegas, and I've been here for 4 years, and I came in from California. I lived there for 50 years, and prior to that, I joined the Marine Corps in 1952 and got out in 1953. My birth date is 4/14/34. That's April 14th, 1934. And I was born in Columbus, Ohio.
Yep.
I grew up there, and that's where I quit school in the 10th grade. And I decided to join the Marine Corps because that was one of the things. To be honest with you, I went to the Navy, and they said that their billet was completely filled. I went to the Air Force, and they said that they were not recruiting. I went to the Army, and they weren't looking for any. I didn't want to go in the Army, so I stuck my head in the Marine Corps door, and the recruiting sergeant says, "What are you looking for?" And I says, "Well, I just wanted some information." He says, "Boy, you'll never make it." And he just pulled me in, and I joined.
Did you know about the breakout of Korean War?
Only as a 18-year-old boy would know at that time. You hear about the Korean War, you see things, but you don't really understand at that time what was going on. And I was in that category.
Ah.
So I was dumb and young and full of chewing gum.
So where did you go to receive the basic military training?
Well, I joined and I swore in Cincinnati, Ohio, and they flew me to San Diego, California, a Marine Corps recruit depot. And that's where I went through basic training.
And what was your specialty?
Communications.
Okay.
When I got out of boot camp, it was communications of 2311.
So what does that mean, communication here? The radio or wiring?
Well, I learned the basics of communications, of wiring, of the telecommunications, just the basics of how to operate a PRC-10 radio. That was basically it, the communications part.
Then where did you go to Korea?
Where did I go? In Korea? To Korea?
No. Where did you go in the state to leave for Korea?
San Diego, aboard the MS, well, the ship, it was a maritime ship. I'm trying to think of the name of it right now, and I can't think of the name of it. But we went directly to Korea at Incheon, to Incheon.
So you didn't stop by in Japan?
Yes, we stopped by at Kobe for 3 hours to refuel, I believe. And then it was Kobe, and then we went to Sasebo, and that was another 3 hours. I think they picked up troops, I'm not sure. And then we went straight to Incheon, because I spent my 20th birthday aboard ship, my 19th, no, that was my 20th birthday aboard ship. But then when I came home 13 months later, I spent my 21st birthday aboard ship. So there was a 13 months at the beginning of the April, my birthday's on the 14th, and then I came back in the middle of the ocean on the 14th of April. Now, you wanted to know what my feelings were when I came into Incheon's harbor? I think it was about 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, and there was a mist on the ocean, and like in many of the Oriental islands that are just sitting there, it looked very, very eerie, and I was scared, very, very scared, because I didn't know what to expect. It was the anxiety of the unknown, okay? And then when we got to a certain point off of the coast, they anchored, and we went down the side of the ship. MST, well, anyway, that comes later. It'll come to me. On the ropes. What are they called? The rope ladders. The cargo.
net.
Yeah, cargo
Cargo net.
Yeah. And the cargo net, we went down with everything we owned to fight battle, and our sea bags came up about 3 days later. okay, to catch up with us.
But there was no resistance from enemies there, right?
At that time, we could hear a lot of action going on. Okay?
Just here, but not...
Not there, not at Seoul. This was in Seoul that we got off at Incheon Harbor. So we went directly to Seoul, and then from Seoul, we went into a little town called Munsan-ni, and that was a Munsan-ni railhead. And from there, we were shipped up to our units at the front, and I was assigned to the 4.2 Mortar Company. 4.2. Now let me describe what a 4.2. We called them four deuces. 4 deuces. And it's a mortar that is about, I don't know, 42, 45 feet off the ground, and it has a trajectory, a shell that's 4.2.
I see.
Okay, and it is a big shell. It's 1 meter. Well, there's a 405 howitzer that it's way back at the back of the troops, but the 4.2 Mortar Company is 106 millimeters. So by just 1 millimeter, that's how big the shell is. I think a maximum range is about 12 to 1,500 miles. So
what part of front line? Do you remember the name, camp name, or?
Well, we were in headquarters group.
Okay.
And a headquarters company, and there were mortars assigned to each of the battalions down to the companies. And our company was to be in support of the battalion, 1st Battalion, 1st Marines. And I was assigned to Fox Company as a forward observer. Are you familiar with what a forward observer was?
Yeah.
Well, and I was by myself as far as representing the 4 deuces. But in a little, where I was assigned, there was 2 people from the 105 howitzers. There were 2 people from the 80 mortars, and there was 2 people from the 60 millimeter mortars. And then there was only myself from the 4.2 Mortar Company. And we shared, going out on watches and on patrols and things like that. But if there's any action, and I was stationed at the DMZ, about 2 miles east of Panmunjom.
Oh.
Okay? And I'd say about a half a dozen times we took our chances going through the rice paddies to go over to Panmunjom to get a good meal. And all the North Koreans were there, the South Koreans, the representatives from the 1st Marine Division were there. They were in negotiations that have never resulted in any positive action. So, and it was quite eerie in a way of going in and having dinner, or it was usually lunch, because by the time it took us now this is 2 miles, to go through the rice paddies, about 2.5 hours.
Why does that?
Because they had
so long?
landmines there that were not registered, and we were not supposed to go over there anyway, but we did. It's just one of those things that you take your chances. And we would go in pairs of 2 or 3. Okay. Then at night we saw a lot of action going over on the north side of the DMZ. Actually, the DMZ had just been created by, I think it was a colonel, that made negotiations to designate the 38th parallel at that time in 1952. All right, latter part of 1952. So the way it was, you had the North Koreans over here, and then you had barbed wire fence. You had a road that was right here, and then about 100 yards, they had the barbed wire fence that we couldn't go over. And they had 100 yards over there that we couldn't go over. Now, they had this road that would go between, and the North Koreans must have had about about 20 or 30 times a day and at night that they would go through the DMZ, and it was like they were testing us to go ahead and fire on them. All right. And then today, when I said 100 yards from the DMZ, today it's about 3 miles wide, and they've got buildings there and everything. But there were several times that we had firefights, that the North Koreans would come across the DMZ at night and, you know, spook us. I can remember one incident where I had to call in by what we call landlines. Landlines were the actual wiring, and then we would have to crank the telephones and this type of thing, the communications of it. We went, let's see, what I'm trying to say. I went out one night, or after I tried to contact Division about what was going on, and my phone didn't work, so I had to check the lines, and I went out, and about every 30 feet, they were cut. Then I'd fix that and go to another 20 or 30 feet and fix that. And I think at that night I fixed about 10 connections, and I was just scared as hell because I didn't know when I was going to be able to get through, and if there was anybody there that was going to stop me. You know what I mean? That's the fear, the anxiety of everything. The night watches, the days we didn't know what was going to be happening, and all these anxieties were very high with me. I was scared, in other words. So there's no.
So you said that you were scared when you were landing in Incheon, and that continued.
That continued from the day I left because we just didn't know what was going to happen.
So 3 miles from the DMZ to north and south, right? And
that's today.
Right.
Back then, it was only
100 yards.
It was 100 yards on our side and 100 yards on their side.
Yeah. So 100 yards is about 3 miles, right?
No.
No?
No. 100 yards is, let's see.
What is the mileage?
Well, let's say meters. In a mile, oh golly.
100 yards is kind of 100 meters.
Little less than 100 meters.
Yeah.
About, I'd say 60 meters. But from that, isn't that right, about 60? It's 5/8 of a mile. Yeah. Now, where we were about maybe 9 miles from the Mjim River. They had the Freedom Gate Bridge crossing, and then they had the Mjim River crossing. There's 2 major bridges that we could fall back on. But we only had, if they had a major invasion, then we had about 15 minutes to get back 9 miles. All right? And that's the best way we could do it. In other words, we were expendable.
So it was so close, right?
Yeah.
You were able to see every activities of enemies.
Absolutely. We had a binoculars.
Yeah.
But these binoculars were what we called BC scopes. They started here, and they came up here, and they went this way for about 10 inches. So you could see for 20, 25 miles. So the answer to your question was, when we were on duty, we had a bunker that we could go into, and we could look and see what the enemy was doing. One day we'd see this beautiful, village over here, and the next day the village would be gone. They were playing mind trips on us. They were doing everything. At night they used to blow the horns and beat the drums, and then they'd have music that would come up in the middle of the night, something to to play on our minds, and they did a good job. I have to say that. Those kind of things are what bothered me. So how do you explain that? I can't. And I can't explain the cold weather that we went through. No cold weather here in the United States have any comparisons that I know of. It was just cold, and we didn't have the cold weather um, clothing to go along with it. And so, I mean, these type of things, you're cold, you don't know how to get warm. There's just no way of describing it.
Were there any dangerous moments that you might have lost your life?
Yes, there's a couple of them. More than that. I think about 6 times there was where we had firefights with the North Koreans. A firefight is when they'd come over and start shooting and we would shoot back. I was afraid that I was going to get killed, and I don't know if I killed anybody. And that's just one of the things, the unknown. You know, you fire at what you see at night at a fire flash over there, so you shoot at that, hoping you hit it, who was ever dead. And that happened about 6 times. And then there was another time, and this was about maybe 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning. We were in our bunker where we slept. There was a knock on the door, and there was a voice saying, "Captain Black, Captain Black." So one of the guys said, "Come in." Well, they opened up the door, and here were 2 North Koreans with their hands up high. And 6 of us just, there was 45s and M1s firing, I mean, looking at them with our rifles and our hand weapons ready to shoot them. That's how it hit. And we were half asleep, but we knew what to do. We all slept with our rifle. Everybody slept with their rifle.
But what do you mean by Captain Black? How did North
We found
Koreans
out later, when we called back the division, that there was 2 that were captured by us. We didn't capture them, they just come over, okay? They sent jeeps over there, and they interrogated all of us. And we found out that Captain Black was a code word for North Koreans to come across to give information. But we didn't know that at the time.
How did North Koreans know about it?
I don't know. I don't know how the North Koreans knew about it. That was at the division level. It wasn't at my level. So, in other words, they apparently had somebody over at the North Korean side that that they could communicate with, and how, I don't know.
So you're saying that these 2 North Korean soldiers said
Captain Black.
Captain Black, Captain Black,
yes,
by themselves, right?
That's right.
So they knew that this code, when they say this, that the Americans will recognize that they want to be...
That we learned later, but we were not told until it happened. So in other words, that was the communications from the troops, from the up level.
So you were scared to death, just about to fire them, right?
Absolutely. That was a very traumatic time.
And nothing's been done until they near to your bunker.
They saw, I don't know. I can't answer that question, how they recognized where we were. I just don't know. You're asking a very good question, because the upper echelon didn't tell us anything until later. We had a watch on, we had a personnel on duty watching, all right? But apparently it slipped by there, because you knock on the door, that's scary as hell. They could have thrown in a grenade, or they could have shot us, or whatever.
Wow, you were lucky, actually.
Well, you asked me where a traumatic time was, you know.
I mean, you're lucky. If they threw the hand grenade, you know.
Absolutely, I was lucky. That's why I'm here. So.
When did you leave Korea?
And it was 1950, 52, 53. It was April 1953.
How was life there?
My paycheck, I think, was about $52 a month. Now, that's what strikes me.
What did you do with that money?
I never got. Well, we had what they called MPC, and
military.
That was military script.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you didn't get that unless you wanted it. In other words, you say, "Can I have 20?"
Right.
Yeah. And the only time that I used that money was when I went over to the Panmunjom headquarters, and I think I had to spend 35 cents for a meal. All right, and I thought that was really cheap on their part. They should have given it to us, but they didn't. So,
who sold the food to you?
Yep. Yeah, that's what they did.
Who? Military?
Yeah, the military.
T-bone steak?
Turkey.
Are you sure?
No, I'm not. I'm absolutely sure. I ate it, and I went back for seconds. Good hot mashed potatoes with a lot of butter on. Fresh milk. Oh, fresh milk. not powdered milk, fresh milk, all right, and a nice salad, all right, that you don't get. Now, that's what I got at the Panmunjom headquarters. Now, you wanted to know what my meals were?
Mm-hmm.
My meals consisted of a can of sausage.
Right.
Or
sea ration.
Yeah, that's it. And I tell you what, for one solid, well, I guess it was about 40 days, that's all I had, was just sea rations, and that was it. And this is a period of time when the monsoon seasons come through. The roads that you go through, the mud was like this. You'd step in them, and you stepped out of your boots. So that's how it was.
Where did you arrive in the state when you were returning back home?
San Diego.
San Diego again.
That's
were
right.
Were there any welcoming band?
Oh, there was a beautifully welcoming band, and there was the people that had their relatives that had their people's sons or sons. There wasn't any women in that time were there, but that was the only welcoming committee, the band. And then they put us on buses, and the buses looked like cattle cars. They did. And from there we went to our bases on Camp Pendleton. We were first at Las Pulgas, and then we went over to another base called San Mateo. They had just built it. So, and that's where I spent the rest of my time, was at that point in time.
So looking back those 60 years, what is the Korean War to you?
I'm very disappointed that there has not been a settlement between the North and the South Korean people. This is they call, well, anyway, it's a war that's forgotten as far as I'm concerned. A lot of people, even my own son, doesn't know anything about the Korean War. My daughter doesn't know anything about the Korean War. They haven't asked me about the Korean War. I have tried to talk many times about the war, and the conversation shifts to another subject. Well, afterwards, this is the afterthoughts. Why were we there? That was the first UN involvement at that time. Mm-hmm. Nobody ever heard of the UN. Who in the hell ever heard of Korea?
Right.
Yeah. So in other words, we were the first in, but that never hit me until after. I'm talking about 20, 30 years afterwards. Yeah, why were we there? And Harry Truman is the one that wanted to, get into the Cold War. Well, that's how he did it. All right? But these things, you're talking about a 18, 19-year-old brat.
Yeah.
All right? That didn't know his ass from a hole in the ground, joins the Marine Corps, and they took over my life for 4 years.
Yeah. So do you regret?
No, I do not regret joining the Marine Corps.
How about being in Korea, fighting there?
I did what I was told to do. That's the only way I can express it.
Have you been back to Korea?
No, I'd like to go.
You still don't regret?
No. You mean the Marine Corps?
Korea? No, being in the Korean War.
No, because I grew up. Now, after I got out of the Marine Corps, I worked 3 jobs for a long time. Then I went to college, trying to buy a house, had 3 kids. My sleep pattern was about 4 hours a night for 5 years. And then I got into another job that each way I'd go, I was a manager at a plastic company as far as, a manager. And then I had my own business, in a sense. I was a regional director out of California with an invention company.
What is the legacy of Korean War and Korean War veterans?
I know this, that the South Koreans have a better economy than the North Koreans. In other words, I mean that they are living even better than sometimes we are here in the United States. I really appreciate the South Koreans. In other words, I give them this, because they have done something with their lives. They've built from ashes, because I saw those ashes. Mm-hmm. When I was there wasn't a tree standing, and only bushes about 3 or 4 feet high, if that high. It was all blown away. Little villages, no villages. Munson Railhead, there was just a lot of, it was, I can't just describe it. There was 2 or 3 buildings, but that was where we were, away from the DMZ. So that's where, most of my time in Korea was spent at the DMZ. I give them all kind of honors. I love them. They have been so courteous to me when they've been here. And I wear this hat, and they come up to say, "Are you Korean War?" "Yes, I'm Korean War. We want to thank you." They come up to me and recognize it. And they can't speak good English, but they recognize it. Mm. And that in a way just gives me chills. Get goosebumps. You know, it's appreciation. They recognize it.
Any other comments that you want to add to this interview?
No, not really. I'm just real happy that you have come around to give, you know, an interview to, you know, the Korean veterans. And I've tried very hard to line up a bunch of them. And I'd say thank you very much.